Good morning. My name is Scott Galloway. I teach at NYU, and I appreciate your time. I have 2,100 seconds and 184 slides. Let's light this candle. I'm going to take you through what I think is the state of play in retail, talk a little bit about the consumer economy, what I believe are the emerging funnel wars in tech. I believe we're in an era of non-innovation. Some very well-publicized companies, many who will be on the stage, give us the illusion, mostly fueled by the media, that we're in this enormous era of innovation. I think we're in an era of non-innovation, mostly at the hands of monopoly and a tyrannical onslaught of technology where we seem to have lost the script and no longer hold these firms to the same account that we've held every other company in the history of our economy. I want to talk a little bit about the unicorn class. My sense is the market is starting to throw up on the unicorn class, and I want to talk about who I think the winners are, the ones that actually make some sense, and the others that have just entered into consensual hallucination with that they're a viable business. And then I'll make some predictions, which I always enjoy doing. So with that, consumer spending is strong. So we're in what is arguably the best economy in a while. It's obviously, we've got a lot of prosperity. I would argue not a lot of progress, but that's a lot of, or that's another talk show. But we have, consumer spending is up substantially. If you were to look at retail, though, there's essentially two retail economies. There's Amazon, and there's everyone else. And there's a lot of, again, media around some companies in retail that are doing well. But for the most part, retail is a very difficult business right now. And if you look at the retail ETF over the last 5 years, it's actually down versus the S&P at 46%, and then Amazon, which is up 420%. And typically, retail stocks trade in sympathy with one another. If the limited is up 100% the next year, chances are Kohl's and Williams-Sonoma will also be up. But the marketplace has decided that Amazon is, in fact, retail's antichrist. And every time Amazon goes up, we assume that it's bad for the rest of the retail market, which it usually is, and the rest of retail goes up. And it's a pretty safe prediction that over the next 12 months, Amazon will do well, the other is retail. We see it in store closures. So this is on a net basis, looking at store openings, plus or minus store closures. And as you can see, once we hit 17, these store closures started to kind of hit a certain acceleration. Now, a lot of this was just overdue. We have too many stores, too many square feet. You've probably seen this before. We love to talk about department stores. Department stores are dead. They just don't know it yet, or most know it. The reality is, my general viewpoint is no millennial, no one under the age of 40 with any options will ever take an escalator to shop. I can do a strategic strike into a Sephora, get my La Roche-Posay, and I've timed it in somewhere between 4 to 7 minutes. Anytime I set foot in a department store, I'm there for half an hour. You're just in for half an hour. And I don't think young people and time-starved consumers will just put up with this format any longer. So it's just a difficult business. There's just no getting around it. Look at what's happened, and wallet share across different categories, and department stores is really kind of on its last leg. By the way, department stores have been beat up so badly, I would argue they're probably pretty good investments. I'm on the board of a company that owns the largest Yellow Pages company in America, and it's been a fantastic business. Because typically companies die, but they don't die as quickly as we think they're going to, and there's opportunities to harvest a lot of cash from them. So we see this across, I mean, just look at what's happened to the individual shares of department stores relative to the rest of retail. And then we look at percentage of products on sale. So department stores are already in this kind of inexorable downward spiral as indicated by the percentage of products that are on sale. At Section 4, the company I work for now, we try to build a technology that goes out and scrapes every website to look at promotionality and look at agility, how facile is the supply chain as indicated by new products. Department store value proposition has basically been eaten alive by Amazon. Everything department stores do, Amazon can do better. And it's not just Amazon. We have obviously a lot of companies that are doing okay in retail. I would argue the only two companies right now in our modern economy that are effectively landing counter blows on big tech is one, Walmart, I think, is effectively landing counter punches on Amazon, and Disney is landing counter punches on Netflix. Target just hit a 52-week high despite some of the very well-publicized problems from them a few years ago. They're doing very well. Walmart's obviously going after more supply chain investments. If you look at their website, which is a great way to kind of get real insight into a company strategy, they're clearly focused on supply chain, no pictures of stores. Click and collect at Walmart is probably the greatest shareholder unlock of the last decade in retail, where they recognized the NPS scores on grocery are fantastic. They're the largest organic farmer of eggs. Most of the people in this room would feel good about groceries from Walmart. Most of you do not feel good about going into a Walmart. So we have the groceries here, we have the in-store experience here. So if we give people the opportunity to pick up their groceries without taxing them with the in-store experience known as Walmart, it's this massively accretive action for shareholders. And it's probably been the greatest unlock in retail over the last 10 years. They've also been very smart about getting into the business of overpromising and underdelivering, which should be the tagline for big tech. And that is they are constantly putting out press releases. Most companies used to underpromise and overdeliver, and then people started saying, we're going to have 1 million autonomous taxis within 12 months from Tesla. So I guess in about 5.5 months, supposedly there's going to be 1 million driverless Teslas in America. Or, hey, let's bring a 5-year-old from 60 Minutes and talk to him about drones. Anyone here gotten anything from a drone? Story that results in multiple expansions such towards the requisite investments to become a quote-unquote innovator. Innovation is Latin, money to compete with big tech that has access to cheaper capital. But Walmart is effectively doing this, reducing their EBITDA, but taking the story and the innovation vision up, and the market is rewarding them with an expansion in their multiple. So department stores, really easy to kick while they're down. The most interesting thing, I think, in retail, or one of the more interesting things, is specialty retail is about to get their turn at the woodshed. And that is, okay, we know department stores are screwed. Tell me something I don't know. We're about to see specialty retail, specifically in apparel, go through the same sort of disruption that's happened in department stores over the last decade. This is the number of store closures announced in 2019 by type. So as you can see, a lot of stores being closed across these three. This is the number of stores that have closed in specialty retail. So what's going on here? We have tremendous destruction in the square footage in malls of specialty retail. The primary value proposition of specialty retail is voice. You're basically paying a margin, not only for an experience, but for, quite frankly, someone who has better taste than you. Right? You go in, and Williams-Sonoma doesn't have 50 toasters, they have the right 2. And someone with better taste than you in kitchen appliances has picked out these 2. And they create a voice such that if you bought anything at Restoration Hardware, it would probably look okay. Whereas a lot of bigger or kind of like big box retailers, you couldn't say that. So voice and merchandising are really the core value proposition of specialty retail. But some of that voice or some of that merchandising expertise has been disarticulated and reassembled in the form of zeros and ones across different sites, specifically Instagram, which is now helping people better merchandise than specialty retailers. So who's going to win? People who offer great experience, speed, exclusives. I think Restoration Hardware is an incredible company. And that is, they talk about vision. I think the CEO and the team there do really crazy things. I don't know if anyone's been to their Palazzo or their store in the meatpacking district, but as someone who knows a lot about retail, if they had toured me around that concept, which they did before it opened, I would say, this is fantastic. There's no way this is going to work on a shareholder level. It's just too expensive, too crazy. And it's crazy until it works. And that store right now is producing about $130 million a year, just that store. And little things, like Gary Freeman decided he didn't want alcohol in the restaurant because he didn't want guys hitting on women. You know, little things so that women feel like they're in a safe place to go have lunch. And it's those sorts of observations and risks, because alcohol is your highest margin product in a restaurant, and said, we just want something different. We want a different feel. So they serve wine, but they don't serve hard alcohol. Recurring revenue, this is a great membership program. Everyone talks about Prime, but 500,000 members, 95% of gross merchandise volume goes through the Restoration Hardware's loyalty program. Think about that, 95% goes through their program. About 500,000 people paying $100 a year, 50 million. You got to think the thing doesn't cost more than $2 to $5 million to administer. You're talking about 45 million in EBITDA, attached to 12 multiple. This is a $500 million accretive decision, their membership program. We want to talk about agility. If you want to see a forward-looking indicator of how a retailer is going to perform, you want to look at how quickly they're turning their merchandise. Innovation is a synonym for new, and that is how fast are companies putting new products out. On average each day, how many of their products are new. You got to give people a reason to come into the store. And if you're not turning your merchandise really quickly, they assume that they can just come in every few months as opposed to every day. Fast fashion is starting to actually leak into luxury. The luxury players are now becoming very agile in terms of their supply chain. And they're also focusing more on some of their items and merchandising around items that have a shorter lead time, everything from fanny packs to clutches. And there's just no getting around it. Faster you get stuff, more products, more visits from the same individual. So speed, the world doesn't belong to the big, it belongs to the fast. So fast fashion has really changed the industry in terms of a focus on this very boring thing called supply chain agility. It's the hard stuff and the boring stuff that really moves the needle. We're seeing retailers go vertical, and that is they use other people's brands just to provide credibility for their own brands. Very hard to make a living selling other people's brands because that consumer is just a click away from some other channel of distribution offering the same product at a lower price. I think Revolve is a very interesting company. Obviously, the margins on your own brand are much greater, so they use a series of other well-known brands to provide a halo for their own dozens and dozens of private label brands. So what is the next fast fashion? People look at Amazon as being the disruptor of specialty retail. Actually, if you look at specialty retail and apparel, fast fashion has taken more out of specialty retail than Amazon has. So specialty retail and apparel has been disrupted, if you will, not only by Amazon, but more by fast fashion. So the question is, who could potentially disrupt fast fashion? We're seeing the fast fashion boom, it looks like, come to an end. And that is Inditex's wealthiest family or second wealthiest family in Europe behind Arnault is the Zara family. Stock has gone sideways for the last 4 years, and we see H&M has lost about 70% of its market capitalization over the last 5 years. So fast fashion looks to be showing signs of aging. This is what I think is the most disruptive force in apparel right now, and that's secondhand. And I was talking to Jen from Rent the Runway, and she was saying that when you're talking about fast fashion or rental versus subscription versus resale, it's just really nomenclature talking about the cadence of when you take an item and how often you turn it in or get a new item. But the secondhand marketplace is going to capture so many trends around sustainability, around the fact that a 30-year-old woman, for the first time in our country's history, doesn't have as much money as her parents did at the age of 30, so she needs to do more with less. So the notion of all these things lining up and people being more comfortable wearing other people's clothing is kind of creating this perfect storm of disruption. And when you think, this stat kind of blows my mind. Secondhand is supposed to be bigger than fast fashion by 2028. And when you think about the amount of wealth and sheer gross merchandise volume that goes through fast fashion, and to think that resale may be bigger than that by 2028, you're talking about a fairly significant reallocation of capital and spending in the marketplace. Driven by young people, this is where they expect to buy stuff. In other words, looking forward, where do they expect to be buying more, or which by age group? And then sustainability. Everyone talks a big game about sustainability. We all claim to care. Most of us use it as a tiebreaker, but it does seem among a younger generation to be more palatable to be wearing other people's stuff, whereas people in my generation just would never have thought of that as a viable option. And then we have the guys who are the curators and the authenticators who come into your home or figure out a proprietary technology, and then we have the marketplaces, and I think there's market for both. And then we have what I believe is the gangster move in retail, and that is figuring out a technology that makes sales associates more productive. Organic intelligence, while everyone's trying to figure out a way to fire cashiers with artificial intelligence, if you look at the majority of retailers that are really thriving, they figure out a way to use technology to make their salespeople or their associates more productive, more utile, or differentiate them. StockX does an interesting job with transparency, looking or tracking at the price levels of a certain shoe in the marketplace and then letting the consumer, sort of what Kayak does or some of the airline sites do. And then we are going to see an unbelievable shift in the type of where people buy this stuff. So look at department stores. So in 2019, 39% of consumers plan to spend less time in department stores. Only 13% said they're going to spend more. And then look at secondhand, right? Basically everybody is saying, or the majority of consumers are saying they're planning to spend more time or more money on secondhand. This is the site traffic. We track site traffic across several thousand sites to try and see if we can find any trends in the data set. And this is the traffic across some iconic retailers who get really nice traffic. Vuitton is up 19%, Gucci's down 20%, but granted that's off a very hot few years, Burberry's flat. Now look at the real. So I'm very negative on most companies because I'm fairly depressed most of the time. I actually think the real, and I want to disclose, I don't own the real stock. I only believe in investing in unregulated monopolies, so I don't own the real yet. But I think this company could potentially be a very disruptive company. I said that last night, and the stock's up 7%. Clearly me. Too little, too late. Retailers, government. We have this incredible void in our leadership. Things have gotten so polarized that effectively nothing gets done on issues, even issues that we seem to agree upon. We can't get DC to lead and even bring us together on issues that the majority of the populace seems to have some sort of agreement or consensus around. And a lot of thoughts and prayers coming out of DC around gun violence. And then Walmart steps in, is under a lot of pressure after their shooting at their El Paso store that took 23 lives. And they went in, over the course of the last few years, this didn't happen after the shooting. This has been what Walmart has implemented over the course of the last few years. But if you were to look through this, the majority of the people in this room, would be comfortable with an all-out ban. And then the majority of people in another room, somewhere in a red state, think we should, really gun control is a threat to very basic constitutional rights. But the majority of America is somewhere in the middle on this, and that is they believe that Americans should have access to guns with a background check that aren't weapons of war. And that's a crude summary, but it's a fairly accurate summary of how most of America feels. And if you read where Walmart is, that is kind of where they came out. So they banned sales of ammunition. They're taking their ammunition share down from 20% to 6 to 9%. So they are making economic sacrifices here that is typically found in assault weapons. They're doing background checks. They've raised the age limit from 18 to 21. They're offering their background check technology to other retailers. You have to be on video when you buy a gun. They're recording you. So, and I'm not making a case saying whether they're right or wrong. What I'm saying is they are likely where most of America is on this issue, and they made these changes, and they did what we would like to think our leaders would do, and that is they listened and they tried to figure out where their constituents are, and then they acted. So Amazon, is number 2 that Jason pointed out yesterday. I didn't know that. Walmart is number 1, largest private employer in the world, I believe. And if you look at their revenue, it's equivalent to the GDP of Hong Kong and the Ukraine, just to give you a sense of the scale of the business. If you took every Walmart store and parking lot, it would be bigger than 2 Manhattans. So my question is, isn't really Walmart more like America right now in many ways? If 150 million people go into a Walmart every week, how many people really touch the federal government every week? So while the federal government's charged with medium and long-term decisions, Walmart on a daily level, the decisions they make in many ways have more impact on America than DC has. So in my thing here is this is president, but this is the guy who's acting presidential. And that is, we see this enormous void, and retailers or corporate leaders are sort of stepping into it. And I would argue that this was a very deft move on the part of Walmart. Funnel wars. So in marketing, this is kind of a very basic construct. People learn about your brand, they become aware of it, then they think, oh, I want a car. Then they think, okay, I'm going to go into the distribution channel and I'm going to start thinking about buying it. They buy it, and then hopefully there's some sort of program that spins them back around over and over again. The funnel, if you will. And we're in full funnel wars, and that is all of big tech used to be sort of understand their swim lane in the funnel, and now they all decide, they wake up in the morning, I think they all look in the mirror and say, hello, Mr. and Mrs. President. I think they all think they're going to be president, but two, they all say, hello, owner of all digital, all the time for everybody. They're all going after the full funnel. So Facebook is sort of the gangster around funnel, more general awareness, more banner ads, 2.7 billion people globally. Trying to get into purchase encrypted, I think where they're going with encrypted backbone, among other things, is your ability to just click on a pair of Allbirds on Instagram and have it immediately sent to you with a secure payment platform and an encrypted back end. And going, like I said, I think Instagram is going to become incredibly important as a channel. Social commerce has had a slow start, and what Bill Gates said, what's supposed to take 3 years takes 10 years in technology, and what's supposed to take 10 years takes 3. I think social commerce was supposed to take 3 years, but I think we're almost hitting that 10-year mark. Remember the experiments and sales people were doing on Facebook about 6, 7 years ago, and they weren't working? I think they're about to start working in spades on Instagram. Google owns the intent part of the funnel. You become aware of something, and then you start thinking about it, and you say, okay, I want to buy this, or you start looking for something. Obviously, they own the intention part of the funnel. And it's more like a wine glass, not really a funnel for them, because they're so fat in the middle. And they also have unbelievable top awareness, but they haven't had much success at the bottom of the funnel. And that is Google Express, their attempt to get into commerce. It just hasn't worked that well for some reason with Google. And then Amazon, I would argue, is full funnel. And the reason people constantly ask me what's going to be the first trillion-dollar company, I got it wrong. I thought it was going to be Amazon. It was Apple. I'm almost certain the first $2 trillion company will be Amazon. And the way to summarize it would be they own the full funnel, or they've made the most progress. And that is, if you think about top of the market awareness, top of the funnel awareness, they are now in 100 million households with Amazon Prime, which is getting half the viewership time of Netflix. I thought that was a staggering statistic, that all of a sudden Amazon is now the second largest spender on original scripted television. This is what you can do when you have zero cost of capital. You can go into other adjacent businesses and overnight, or what feels like overnight, become a viable competitor to the leader. They also are very strong in intent, and that is Amazon is the #1 search engine for product searches. It has double the share of Google when you actually know the product you're looking for. A third of retail, somewhere between a third and half, depending on how you account for it. And then more people have Prime in their household than have cable television, a phone, or a gun, or voted in the last election. So Amazon Prime is, in my view, the most dominant service in the world right now on a percentage basis. I can't think of any phone company, any church, any religion. I think there are now more people who are socialists and capitalists than have Amazon Prime. It just, there is no entity, there's no philosophy, there is no language, maybe English, I guess, in the US, that is more dominant across more households than Prime. So the key around Amazon, we talked about this a little bit yesterday with Jason, is they have been able to have zero cost of capital and get to this size. And traditionally, we haven't let companies get to this size or this value without returning money to shareholders in the form of profits. And about 1.5 years ago, all the analysts said, oh, great, here it comes. Amazon is now profitable, and just wait till it goes. And my thesis all along is that when Amazon has a profitable quarter, Bezos brings his executives into a room and looks at them and says, you fucked up. Greenlight everything. Because why wouldn't we reinvest 100 cents on the dollar as long as the market continues to push profits like everybody else, who when every other company takes profits away, the addict gets very irritable. Amazon doesn't have that problem. So while they'll occasionally punch up into profitability just to say, oh yeah, we can be profitable whenever we want, they will then take it down and make massive reinvestments that make them almost impossible to compete with. Because while everyone else gets a shorter window and then has to show 80 or 90 cents reinvestment and give 10 to 20 back to the investors, Amazon never has to do that. And no one's been able to pull this off. Maybe Netflix, but at this scale, Amazon's the only one. So what you see in their, I love reading prospectuses and earnings reports. So in 2000, Amazon said that it was forced because of their internal systems to start building out a data storage and processing unit called AWS. But they were just doing it for their own internal use. And then in 2017, they said, we've added more of our own logistics to supplement our existing partners. We have no desire to compete with Amazon. We have no desire to compete with FedEx or UPS. We just need to supplement our own offerings. And then boom, as required by the SEC, all of a sudden they start listing FedEx and they start listing other cloud providers as competitors. So what I would say to every company dealing with Amazon is, regardless of what they say, just prepare to be supplemented. The most valuable company in the world in 2025 will be AWS. AWS will be spun prophylactically as Bezos begins to feel the heat of antitrust. There is no pure play way to play the cloud right now. I believe Amazon spun is worth more than Amazon is right now as a whole. Any company that is the fastest pure play growing, most profitable part of technology, i.e. cloud, every shareholder, every institution has to own that stock, and it's going to be AWS. They are now getting into logistics. Amazon Media Group, another amazing business. Amazon Logistics, Amazon is about to go after FedEx and UPS, two stocks that will be cut by somewhere between 10 and 30% over the next 24 months. Even if they perform, even if they hold off Amazon, just the threat of Amazon playing in their sandbox will get investors increasingly worried about UPS and FedEx shareholder value. Amazon dominance in AWS. Amazon now is responsible for almost 1 in 5, or Amazon Logistics or Amazon Fulfillment is now shipping 1 in 5 packages. So Amazon next is going to pass the post office, then they'll pass FedEx, then they'll pass UPS. Some dangerous things happening here. Amazon is jealous of the exploitation that Uber has managed to wreak on its workplace. So it's set up these franchises with these nice, happy-looking people saying, hey, you can own your own business, right? Just don't need to go to the bathroom. I gotta go fast. So welcome to Amazon's second headquarters. And this is me boasting. The new headquarters are going to be in the metro area of New York or DC, because that's where a 53-year-old man worth $105 billion wants to spend more time.
You come right out with it and say they're going to the DC area.
It's either going to be DC or New York. I've been on a dozen public and private company boards. The CEO always cloaks the strategy of the second headquarters in business issues. It only comes down to one thing. The number one reason companies move headquarters is simply where the CEO wants to spend more time. The next headquarters for Amazon will be Washington, D.C., the metro area. And the reason why, and it was always going to be D.C., is one, the Bezos have a home there. So you get the idea. So, and by the way, I recognize that video of me on top of me speaking is shavings of shit on a shit salad. So, look, I'm 54, I'm economically secure, and this is what it means. I get to say no all the fucking time. All the time. All the time, unless Kara asks me to do something, that's why I'm here. You become the master of no. If you're the wealthiest man in the world, you get to say no to more things than anyone in the world. Is a 54-year-old man who's about to be single going to decide to spend 14 weeks a year plus much less 14 minutes in Columbus, Ohio? Is he going to decide he wants to roll in Indianapolis? You're 54, you're worth $150 billion. This is where you are going to be. Full stop. Full stop. These are humans. And this is how they make decisions. And so what happened, right? Oh, we held up. They took their ball and went home, right? No, they haven't. This is the number of jobs open according to LinkedIn at these various firms. Facebook is looking for 214 people open jobs on LinkedIn and on their website. This is how many open jobs in New York Amazon has posted right now. This is how many people have been hired by Amazon since February in the last 6 months. They've hired 1,000 people since they left. AWS has hired 550 people since they said, that's it, we're leaving. They've hired 1,500 people since they pulled out of New York. That means, if they maintain this pace, every job they promised us is coming here without the $3 billion giveaway. Oh, and by the way, he's bought $80 million of real estate. These are the worst poker players in America. And you know who doesn't get enough credit? These three people saved every taxpayer, every school district, every fire department in the New York metro area. They saved them $3 billion. And they were called socialists, and they were called stupid, and CNBC criticized them for not seeing the forest for the trees. They're the fucking geniuses here that told the wealthiest man in the world, put your fucking hand back in your pocket. No midlife crisis here. Because, I mean, let me be clear. I recognize this shit because I'm going through one, but I think it's about to end in 30 or 40 years. Worst brand move of 2019. Instagram and WhatsApp are now going to be by Facebook. And every marketing professor in the world had a grand mal seizure when they heard about this, right? That's like Dreamliner 787. That's like Boeing announcing, I know, let's call it the Dreamliner 787 MAX. Because that's going so well. Or I know, let's say Porsche. What can we do? Well, we own Porsche. I know, let's call it Porsche by Volkswagen. I mean, it's literally brand heresy, but in sort of their weird way, I do think Mark Zuckerberg is smarter than the most of us, and this kind of indicates a huge transition, and that is a move from the brand era to the monopoly era. And I think what Mark Zuckerberg has decided is that even if I ruin tens of billions of dollars in brand equity, if I can say I'm conjoining the triplets such that I become more difficult to break up and my monopoly has 2, 5, 10% less likelihood of being broken up, then that's a smarter move to make. Yeah, whatever, marketing profs will tell me how stupid it is. But at the end of the day, I have a $500 billion monopoly. And any threat to that is much greater than any threat to my brand equity. And I think this kind of indicates that we are now officially in the monopoly era as opposed to the brand era, where brand decisions lose out to any decision that protects a monopoly business model. And I think Mark's trying to conjoin these triplets such that when the DOJ and the FTC come in and claim, you try to break up any one of us or separate us, the whole thing is going to die. The breakup has begun. And the market got it wrong. The day that the breakup was announced, the firms shed the value of Boeing. Oh no, the breakup started, that's going to be bad for shareholders. This is their one-day performance the day the DOJ announced about 4 months ago that they were going to break up. What's happened since then? Huge decline, or that day, right? But what people miss is that breakups are good for shareholders. This is where the market got it wrong. Typically, breakups are very accretive to shareholders because what we find is PayPal is a better company and worth more on its own. That AT&T put into 9 companies as a whole is much more valuable than AT&T was. So the market got it wrong here. And this is me boasting again. This is what I said in June about the impending breakup. Take Facebook, Google, and Amazon. You're about to see a $30 to $100 billion increase in market cap over the next 90 days as analysts begin doing a hard, serious analysis of a breakup and a sum of the parts analysis, which is actually greater in terms of valuation than they are now. So the market's got it wrong. Look at these stocks. And what's happened? We've seen a dramatic increase in market capitalization as people realize, well, WhatsApp would be a pretty cool independent company, worth a lot of money. How much would Instagram be worth as an independent company? And they've not only added the value of Boeing back since then, they've added the value of Boeing and Airbus since the quote-unquote decline in their stock due to the fear of a breakup. We talked about this. I think the most valuable company in the world in the next 5 years is going to be AWS. Let's try and do a valuation. Let's look at its current numbers. Assume it trades at the same enterprise value to EBITDA as Amazon. That means it's worth $120 billion, but it's a much better business in e-commerce. What if it traded at the same multiple of EBITDA as Salesforce? It'd be worth $1.5 trillion, most valuable company in the world. And what if it traded at the same multiple of Slack at its IPO? It'd be $1.7 trillion in value. In sum, I think this company is worth somewhere between $300 billion and $1.5 trillion right now, much less in 2 years. And Amazon is about a $950 billion valuation right now. Same with Instagram. I think Instagram is worth 2/3 of what Facebook is as a whole right now. And as an independent company, trades at somewhere between 150 and 300 billion just on its own. The FTC fined Facebook $5 billion. The day that fine was announced, Facebook's stock value went up 11 billion. So the government in the US is no longer a countervailing force to private power, it's a co-conspirator. And this fine was almost perfect. If it had been just one more zero, if it had been 50 billion, it would have been perfect. Because it wouldn't have put Facebook out of business. Facebook has $49 billion in cash. They could have handled this fine. But rather than the stock going up $11 billion and every executive in big tech high-fiving each other, right, what would have happened if the FTC had levied a $50 billion fine against Facebook? This is what would have happened. The next day, every board and every senior executive of every big tech company would have got in a room and said, okay, shit just got real. And we have to figure out a way to put in place the safeguards to ensure that the Russians don't weaponize our elections. We've got to figure out a way to implement some sort of identity construct such that people under the age of 18 aren't on our platforms too long and start getting admitted to emergency rooms in numbers for self-cutting and teen suicide. You would have seen a dramatic change in behavior, but instead what we have told these companies to do is, no, keep violating the law. Keep depressing our teens. Keep perverting our elections. Right? Because if there's a parking meter in front here that costs $100 every 15 minutes, but the ticket is 25 cents, we're all going to break the law. This is what we have told these companies to do, continue to break the law. Winter is already here, unfortunately. We have the worst of both worlds. The breakup has begun, but because it's taking a long time, it's the worst of both worlds. The Big Four have dramatically reduced their acquisitions because they're worried about raising additional antitrust scrutiny. But at the same time, any sector that competes with these four isn't getting seed funding. So how do you know what sector you can't start a business in? Does it in any way compete with the fastest growing parts of our economy, which are dominated by monopolies or duopolies? So we have taken out the largest acquirers because of the threat of antitrust, but because we haven't broken them up, you can't get seed funding in these sectors. It is literally the worst of both worlds right now. And then what sectors are getting seed funding? Easy. Sectors that don't compete with Amazon, Apple, Facebook, or Google. So who gets to innovate in our economy? Who are the people? Who are the innovators? Is it grit? There's all these books from people who have raised really successful kids. What is it? Is it grit? Is it guardrails? Is it letting them explore their creativity? Is it the toys they play with? Is it a constant source of security and love? All wonderful things. Here's who gets to innovate in our economy right now. The innovators are the ones that are creating all the shareholder value, hire from the top schools. A disproportionate amount of their hires come from the top 30 schools. A disproportionate number of students in the top 30 schools come from the top 1% of wealthy households. 60 of the top 100 schools in America have more people from the top 1% of households than they have from the bottom 60%. So who gets to innovate? Who gets to be the people who capture all the spoils of this incredible economy and this incredible system? Who gets to be the innovators? Very simple. The kids of rich people. That's where we are right now. That's where we are. Halcyon. I think the market is finally puking on some of these valuations, and we're about to see a firewall around companies that make sense and companies that sort of rode on the coattails of this consensual hallucination in the marketplace. Uber makes no sense. It has value. It's not going out of business. Lyft is going away. Lyft either gets acquired or goes to zero. There's nothing there other than a shitty business called ride-hailing. Uber has a shitty business called ride-hailing, but it has an incredible global brand and it has a flywheel effect. They have shown the ability to spin out businesses, whether it's Uber Freight or Uber Eats, they'll probably find something there. It's just the stock's going to be off 40 to 80% in the next 36 months. It's growing, but unfortunately it's growing its losses faster. It's the wrong type of scale. To give you a sense, in the latest quarter, they lost the value of Williams-Sonoma. I think you're going to see, the ride-hailing business is probably going to be one of the greatest value destructions from retail shareholders that we've seen in a long time. This was back when everyone was excited about the IPOs. So far, these companies have puked $11.5 billion in value since their IPO. And I think the deceleration so far is going to look quaint compared to what's going to happen in the next 24 months of these companies. This is kind of the Uber or the Tesla of this year. Great company, hope it does well, change the world, ridiculously overvalued. And I'm not going to go into it, I don't have time, but the value, it trades at 65 times revenues versus the multiple of other food companies. I think we have our pets.com of our generation. I need someone to tell me I have 5 more minutes. I'm out of time here. Do I have 5 more minutes? I need someone with a badge. This is Adam speaking at a commencement.
Now, if you have purpose and you have great people, the next thing is build a great product. Now, this one, some people get confused. They think, I've been asked many times, I have this amazing intention and I have great people and my business is still not doing well. I'll tell you another secret. Your business has to make sense. If the business is not making sense, if you're not profitable at the end, yes, there are a few companies, we hear about them, they lose a lot of money every month. Don't build that.
This is a company whose losses are scaling with its revenues. And despite saying they're a tech company 123 times and calling themselves Space as a Service or SaaS, this is a company that rents real estate or goes long-term leases. They have $43 billion in long-term leases. And they lose as much money as they make right now. I mean, this business absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. It's a train wreck. And they've raised $12 billion. The company's not worth $12 billion, meaning any employee with options on common shares has options that are worthless. They shelved the IPO. This company is not going public. That was ridiculous. The markets have finally said, wait, remember Uber? Well, this is Uber on top of Uber. This is even worse. This makes no sense at all. This is their governance structure. So when you're buying a share here, you're buying a share in some subsidiary of a subsidiary that basically, okay, Adam can do whatever he wants.
So when I think of...
I'm going to stop piling on Adam. This is the number of mentions in the prospectus of the CEOs of some great unicorns, right? Or some very popular unicorns. Right? Dara Khosrowshahi was mentioned 29 times in the Uber IPO prospectus. This is the number of times they mention Adam. Community adjusted EBITDA. Pretty soon we're going to have new financial metrics. These are my suggestions. EBG, earnings before gluten. EBBG, earnings before the big dog, tennis balls, pig's ears. EBEPW, and that is earnings before equal pay for women. It's a joke. Okay, but you should buy stock, even though Adam has cashed out of the equivalent of the budget for the FTC, the Peace Corps, and the National Endowment of the Arts. That's literally 700 million flags. And most frightening, Adam is the cousin of Gwyneth Paltrow, who is the founder of Goop, which I think all adds up to the fact that they are, in fact, the Prince of Darkness. I think Goop is an assault on humanity. Okay. This is kind of my metric for who I think gets hit very hard and who survives in this information age economy. Explosive growth, recurring revenue, network effects, flywheel effect, and then you have to look at gross margins, and that's your ability to capture some revenue after you sell somebody something. I think WeWork, Uber, and Beyond Meat are in for a very tough 24 months. I think the real Slack, which I think is overvalued right now, but I think is a great company, and Zoom are going to do well. I apologize, I have to go right to the end. Okay, so some conclusions. Retail's new disruptor, I think, is the resale market. Especially retail commences a department store-like decline. Amazon becomes the most valuable company in the world on the back of the funnel wars. And AWS, within 3 to 5 years, is in itself, after spin, to stave off antitrust action, is going to be the most valuable company in the world. We're in an era of non-innovation, and will continue until big tech gets broken up, and it needs to happen fast because we're in the worst of both worlds right now. The halcyon class of companies that make absolutely no sense, Uber, Lyft, Beyond Meat, WeWork, Tesla, all end the year down 25 to 50%. And I actually wrote this before yesterday. the WeWork IPO gets pulled, and that was announced this morning that that's likely going to happen. The disruptor class that continues to accrete value is Amazon, The RealReal, Zoom, Slack, and Walmart, and also I would add Disney. In the firewall, I do think that some sort of sanity is beginning to creep into the market, and we're starting to see what I hope is a pushback. I hope we're starting to see a pushback against the soft fascism in Britain and the US with the repudiation of Boris Johnson. I hope we're starting to see a pushback on big tech with 48 attorney generals deciding we've had enough of Google and of this idolatry of innovators. My name is Scott Galloway. I teach at NYU, and I appreciate your time.